You're listening to the Back Home Network, presented by Home Field Apparel.
All right, folks, welcome back to Crimson Cast. Scott here with you. A programming note, this was honestly the plan today. As I was watching the game, Galen is en route today to New York, and he was able to land at like 11 o'clock today. Not to give away his where it's 5 million people there, but he's there. And he's able to watch the game, and we were like, maybe we'll try and connect today and do a pod, not sure. And then I was watching the game, and I fly out tomorrow at 5 a.m., good times on American Airlines, or like 5:30 a.m., and then I'm flying into New York. So it was like, all right, if we win, that's nice. If we lose, it's going to be a bummer. It's like, we were kind of like, we love you as the listeners. We're kind of like, all right, maybe we could do something tomorrow. We could figure it out. And then that game happened. It was kind of what I was expecting. And the end of the game is just like, I've got to talk to somebody. I've got to put something out. There's a chance that Galen and I connect at some point later on today as we get ready for meeting up in New York tomorrow, but had to have our friend Taylor Lehman on. Before we get to Taylor, who's sitting here waiting and smiling and has all kinds of thoughts, I want to say we are a proudly sponsored by the Home Network. For any of you guys who are going to New York tomorrow and Monday, Home Field Apparel, part of the Home Network, we're sponsored by Home Field Apparel. Home Field Apparel is doing a kind of a meet and greet and a an event before the games at Madison Square Garden at the Storehouse in New York. So check out their website for that. I will be there tomorrow morning. I'll be tired and maybe cranky from a short flight, but it'll be early morning, but I will be there. I think it's 9 a.m. They start the Storehouse tomorrow on Sunday, and then they're doing it again Monday before the game. So go check it out. They're going to have a pop-up store. They're going to have sales. So you can use the promo code HOME23 today for 15% off your first purchase, and then go to the event tomorrow and go even get more stuff. So check out Home Field Apparel. Taylor, thank you for hopping on such short notice. You can tell I'm already a little bit, I was not prepared to pod. I'm having trouble. I'm stumbling over my words more than normal. But Taylor, how you doing, man?
I'm good, Scott. Thanks for having me on. I'm looking forward to, these reaction pods, like jumping into some of the data and stuff, but a lot of it largely is just reactionary, right? So I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts and kind of working towards shaping my own around this game that I think a lot of people have a lot of thoughts and a lot of different thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, this is different than it. You and I did this for another game this season. It's a little different than what we normally do here on Crimson Cast. Normally, we get a little bit of some time to look into the data. I mean, even like I normally go to like the IU schedule page. They have a good box score. It's like that's not even up yet. So it's like, I'm on Game on Paper. I'm looking at some just like random Google box score. It's like a lot of the stats aren't even up yet. So this is a little different, but for me, I know you have thoughts outside the last 30 seconds or so. For me, what really stood out was the last like 40 seconds of this game, which I think stood out for a lot of people. The game was, I'll leave some of the thoughts for the rest of the game to you. I mean, for me, I'm watching the game and it's like there's moments where, Hauser for Michigan State is having trouble finding hitting open receivers. And I'm like, man, this Michigan State team is they're not good. It's like, oh yeah, but we're down by 7. But we're down to them. Like you're watching them. It like reminded me very much of that Wisconsin game where it's like, this is just a wounded team. But I'm sure that the exact same could be said if you were a Michigan State fan watching the game. But here's the thing. So Michigan State scores that final touchdown in a play where it's just like that guy was not like number 6, which is not going to be tackled, just bounces around. We have like 3 guys touching him. He scores a touchdown, whatever. We drive the ball down. It's awesome. I'm going to lay out, I know people watched it. I'm just going to lay out what happened and my thoughts behind it. Because to me, it's kind of staggering what happened. And so we finish with an 8-yard passing play. So we have the ball in the Michigan State 28. It's 3rd and 2. There's 22 seconds to go. You're down by 3. Sorsby throws a pass to the end zone. There's maybe some pass interference, though. I think it actually might have looked worse than it actually was. Like I'm not sure there was PI. That's a whole different discussion. We can have that. I can see where you could see there's PI. I also don't think it was egregious. I don't think it was a horrible call. Either way, obviously, it's not called because it's Indiana. We don't get those calls. And so now you kind of get this crucible of a decision. So it's 4th and 1. 18 seconds to go. Indiana has 2 timeouts. I'm actually, to be fair, at this point, I'm thinking I kind of like just going for it. Like, you've had some missed field goals this season. I don't want to say not what are you playing for, but like, let's go for it. Like, we're trying to win games, we're trying to win trophies. We're maybe we're in trophy mode, not playoff mode, but like let's win some games. So I got no problem going for, like, truth be told, I got no problem going for it. So we line up for a field goal. I'm like, all right, like, that's kind of but you know what? That's not a bad decision in my mind either. It's like, you can go for it, you can kick a field goal. As always happens, we pick like this random third door that didn't know existed. That's like the worst of all options. So Michigan State calls a timeout. You now have even more time, Taylor, I'm not picking on you, to think it over. So then you line up for a field goal. Fine. But then IU calls a timeout. So we waste one of our timeouts. Again, these are late game situations. Timeouts are important. Tom Allen needs to play Madden, like, just needs to have some time playing Madden, getting used to these moments. So we call a timeout. Like, that timeout is baffling. I'm going to take a pause right here. We'll stop at this point before we got to this point. We have more to go. That is a baffling timeout to me, Taylor. Like, no matter what you're deciding to do, that timeout makes zero sense in my mind.
Yeah, Scott. I've noticed this whenever it gets into field goal range, right? And I don't think IU has a kicker on the roster that they trust. And
Right.
I think that's kind of at the heart of this. And I think whenever they get down into this area of the field, they're just really hoping they get past it, just get a little bit closer,
Yeah.
so that they have a higher percentage chance of hitting these field goals, even though Chris Freeman's hit some a couple, I think he had a 42 and then a 50-yarder. He's shown that he can hit these field goals, but I don't think that they really actually trust him. And I think that was kind of at the heart of some of these moves and later in the game, which, that's something that's an off-season issue.
No, I completely agree. And anyway, so it's like, if you don't if you want to kick the field goal, just kick the field goal. And that's fine. If you want to burn another time out there to give, I guess you're icing your own kicker. I don't know, but kick field goal. But so you just completely just kick the timeout into the sun. It's gone. Fine. So then you run it up the gut, which you barely get that first down, but you get it. But now you can't call a timeout because you just kicked one away 12 seconds ago. So you have to run a play. You could like spike it, but you don't. And then you run a busted play. Busted plays can happen, Taylor. Like, that's fine. This is college. But to me, it's like even more infuriating because you created a situation where you can't have that busted play. It obviously gets called for intentional grounding, but it's like you gave yourself an extra 2.5 minutes of lead time. You knew you were going to go for it. Like, you had to have, you knew you were running that play up the middle. You have to be scripting 2 plays there. You can't use the timeout, take all of that time, and then screw up that second play. You just can't. Like, if you're going to go for this, you have to trust the execution of your team or do things that work. But like, that's the infuriating part of all of this, is like, it was totally intentional grounding. It was a busted play. It sucked, but it's like, to me, it's not as simple as just like, oh man, well, stuff happens. Like, no, like, you created a situation where everyone was rushed and busy, but like, it shouldn't have been, and you had all this extra time because of your wasted time out.
Yeah, no, and some people have been tweeting about the rule itself for intentional grounding. The quarterback has to be under pressure. I think I wouldn't have considered that situation. I wouldn't have considered that under pressure.
Right.
I don't know if I agree with the intentional grounding call, even by the rule itself. But I mean, there has to be some room for subjectivity in there, because it was clearly a miscommunication. But no, you're absolutely right. And kind of what my mind goes back to is, if you name your starting quarterback before week 8, maybe something like that doesn't happen.
I love it. I love it.
So that's kind of where my mind went when I saw the play happen. Like, every time there's a miscommunication like that, I'm like, maybe if this quarterback and receiver had more time to work together before the season started, or even throughout the season, it would have had a different result. But that was just a mess, man, and I could not believe that it happened. I was kind of speechless. I was like, I I mean, I know IU football, like I know these things happen to this program, but you know, there's just always unique ways. There's always a unique way that they're losing these games.
I know. And
But
then
yeah, no, please continue.
the minute they got pushed back, it's like we all knew they were missing that field goal. Like that just was not a makeable. Like there's a world too where you just like if I'm timeout, just call a timeout and just get another penalty. Like just yell at the refs to the point you get another penalty, and then you don't kick field goal. You can just go for a shotgun play. But I mean,
Yeah,
there's an alternate universe where, and again, this is also I would say that like there's two situations here where it's like I like going for it is one like that's one decision point, go for it or not go for it. The thing that never gets brought up is like what play are you running? Like that's the other part of this where I can like going for it but say that play call sucked and like then overall the decision was bad, or you can be like that was to not go for it is it's a little different, like you're kicking the field goal. But too often it's like people just like I shouldn't have gone for it. It's like no, I like going for it. I think the play call sucked. Like again, this run up the middle that you barely get, that just I know they stop the clock for a second, but then you're stuck with this like running clock. You don't have the timeouts. Like my thing would be there's an alternate universe where the two times we were close to the end zone, we run that little sweep play with the tight end that worked perfectly. One time with Bamba, second time with I'm not even well, yeah. It worked twice, and like there's a world where maybe you run that play. Like, look at this like you're 4th and 1. You run that play. I know I'm getting kind of alternate university here, but maybe you get 5, 6, 7 yards. You get that, boom, you call a timeout. You have 12 seconds to go. Now you have some time. Now you can take a shot. You can get everyone lined up. It's not like you're trying to get 2 plays in at a time. Now you got one shot at the end zone. Maybe people are lined up. You still have a timeout in your pocket. So if Sorsby gets sacked, it's like timeout, boom, you still got the field goal. Like that's a much better setup of this game versus I still just can't get to the we're going to line up for field goal and then timeout ourselves and then come up and try and run 2 plays in a row in 12 seconds. But I think that play on 4th and 1 was also a really bad play call. And it's like, it's always that play. Like the run up the gut where you're trying to get a half a yard, like has that ever been a good play for IU?
right, right. No, and kind of along the lines of what you were saying, and I forgot to mention earlier about the pass that was called on grounding. I think, I don't know for sure, but based off the miscommunication that was there, usually that is you're telling the receiver to go out, and
Right.
then the quarterback and receiver are reading the coverage, and the receiver must have read that he wanted to stop the route and run a hitch, get that quick uh gain of yardage and potentially stop the clock by getting out of bounds or something along those lines. But Sorsby must have read it as there was an option there to go deep, and so he threw that ball. And I think that was actually a pretty decent play call if it would have worked.
No, I agree,
But
and I don't want to
yeah,
pick. I mean, you kind of are like I'm not even sure who the receiver was. If it was Carter,
can't remember.
I don't know who was out there, but it's like there also is like situational awareness where it's like if you're, so it's a running clock. I think there's 12 seconds to go. Sorsby's back. Like you only have one timeout left because you burned one. If you're the wide receiver, it's like you can't cut the route short at the 10-yard line. Like what does that do? Like even if you get the ball out of bounds, you probably still can't run another play. Like with 12 seconds to go and one timeout, needing a field goal to tie, you got one shot at a touchdown. So like that's the other piece of like the situational awareness that I do. Like everyone in the field just has to know like that doesn't. Maybe if you're doing a slight hitch and go, but like you still should have been going to the end zone. Like there's no world where cutting the route short and catching it at the 12-yard line or the 10-yard line makes any sense. And again, this is where in my alternate reality universe, even if you just run that crappy up the middle play, you call a timeout, you bring everyone together and just hey, like you got to be in the end zone. Like do not catch the ball if you're 5 yards out, just bat it out of bounds. Like you have time to do that. This is the problem you have. And like you mentioned something about how Allen does, it seems like we get very nervous when we're in field goal range. Like when the crucible gets tough and when the decisions start to get very pressurized and quick, it does feel like he makes the wrong decision and kind of goes for like I think of this kind of like coach speak. Coaches are always like, on to the next game. It's tough. Players play hard. Like they just have coach speak and they just kind of go in the zone. Like feels like he goes in this coaching zone of like, well, I'm just gonna call time. Like I call timeout, and like you just do this kind of the random coaching stuff. It's like that's not always the right call. Just always calling timeout or always doing what you've seen coaches do for 30 years.
Yeah, no. When the game was starting, the very beginning of the game, they were showing Tom Allen on the sidelines, and I've often wondered this, but when his team is on offense, I'm always wondering what's going through his head. Like, what is he what's he thinking? When his team's not, he looks very nervous. He always looks nervous,
Yeah.
but he looks very nervous, and I'm like, what is the process here? What's going through Tom Allen's head when his team's on offense? Because no, yeah, I mean, you're right. The usage of timeouts, and I didn't even think before this like 40-second period that you wanted to highlight. I don't even think before that the timeouts were used in egregious ways. I thought it was okay.
Yeah.
It was just like when they got there was the issue. Then yeah, no, I totally agree,
So
Scott.
I don't know that those are my thoughts at the end of the game. They probably could have kicked a field goal. I don't know if they would have made it, honestly, because we've not had good field goal kicking all season. So, like I said, I think going forward is fine. It's like that was probably the worst the series of events and the way to go forward. It's like you're kind of, but you're not. Like you're just, if you're gonna do it, just go for it. And then that, I again, that third down play where Sorsby throws it and it's pass interference. I like that play. But this is again where I always have to question like the longer term thinking of Tom Allen and the coaching staff is like, you get a 8-yard pass to get to 3rd and 2. At that point, you kind of have to commit at that point what's your plan for 4th down. And it never feels like we're doing that, because if your plan is to go forward on 4th down, you probably shouldn't throw a fade to the end zone at 3rd and 2. Like what you should be trying to do is go for, a 7-yard play there. And then if you don't get it, you can run it in, or like, the second down play that you got the 8 yards, that's probably the pet. Like it feels like if you knew you were going to go for it the whole time, that was just the wrong way to kind of stack the way that you did things.
Yeah.
And I agree. And I totally believe, like, I don't think they thought they were going to go for it until the question I would love to know, Michigan State calls a timeout. We come out and line up for the field goal. What is the plan? Like, were they thinking of kicking the field goal and then he called a timeout to change his mind? Were we doing like that? Like, I would love to know, like, why did you do that? Like, were you trying to see what Michigan State's coverage was on a field goal? Like, I don't know.
Yeah, or did they just get cold feet on the field goal?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, no, I'm with you. The timeout after the Michigan State timeout was just bizarre.
Yeah.
It was.
That's the end. I mean, I think that's about as much as, besides me just ranting the same things over and over again for the end of the game situation. You had other thoughts for the game as a whole. I mean, it was, it was what you'd expect from 2, 3, and 7 teams. Like, not an amazing. I mean, and you watch the game, it's like I'm tired of hearing the announcers talk about spitting into the spittoon. It's a whole other side note. But what were your thoughts on the game as a whole? Because I know you had some thoughts outside of the 40-second crucible at the end.
I thought it was lifeless. I thought the game in general was lifeless. It felt like just the people that we could like pictures of the attendance of the stadium beforehand, which I'm sure it filled in more. That's always how it goes. And knowing that there were 8 seniors out there who were recruited by IU out of high school, out of the 26 on the roster, who were having their senior day in front of this like sparse crowd. Not a great start for the game, I thought, but I thought the game in general it kind of felt inconsequential and lifeless. Like it didn't feel like a trophy game. And if the broadcast didn't mention the spittoon, I don't think a lot of people would have been thinking about it. And but anyway, I mean, it was a Michigan State team. I mean, this team obviously lost his head coach earlier this year. Caton Hauser is like their 3rd quarterback they've played in a game this year, and he's graded by PFF as the worst in the country of all the quarterbacks with at least 100 dropbacks. And then he was 4 yards shy of his career high at halftime against IU, because the secondary apparently can't stop anyone. Nope. So I'm sure Hudson Card will have a hell of a week next week. But no, I mean, but honestly, and so then Michigan State has what is like just shy of 20 inactive players, and it was a game that Indiana should have handled. This whole situation that we just been talking about shouldn't have even happened
That's fair.
because
Yeah.
they should have handled the game, and it's not exactly in Indiana's DNA to do that, but I just thought the circumstances were um extenuating enough where they could potentially do it. But I mean, just looking at Scott, the game on paper report and their successful plays on offense, they had a 60% success rate. That is insane. That is one of the highest that you're going to see in college football this year.
Yeah.
Is 60%, and they scored 21 points. Like I and so I was like, how does that happen? And so obviously I'm going to dig into it deeper later on, but most of it I think was just like field position. I mean, they when they start their drives, you just look at the first half and they don't start a drive uh actually the entire game. They don't start their drive further down the field than their own 30-yard line. I mean that's according to the stat broadcast, but um like I guess you can have all the success you want on offense, but it's going to be a little tougher sledding when that's your field position, So I think that contributed to some of it, but I mean, the defense, you just got to stop somebody.
Yeah.
This is not a. I mean, this is one of the worst offenses in the country, like statistically, and they, I mean, they didn't blow up the box score by any means. They only had a 39% success rate, and but when they were passing, they had a 47% success rate from Caton Hauser. Like, I mean, I know Malik Carr is a really good tight end, and he really burned Indiana in a lot of ways. Really showed that the secondary has to hit the weight room a bit. But you know, I I thought that Indiana should not have been in this situation at the end of the game anyway. And I it's just a second week in a row where the defense has just kind of let the offense down.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It I go to Galen's pregame podcast about this, and I think his analogy that he's used a lot is very apt. Of like a boat that just has holes, and every time you plug something, it's like another hole pops up, and then it's like, all right, well that one's plugged, so we'll take care of this one. And you plug the new hole, and it's like the other one that you plugged pops up, and it's like we need to get Sure Seal. Like the guy in the 2 a.m. infomercial was filling a boat with his Sure Seal glue. We need that guy. Because I hear you, but on the flip side, like you look at plays per drive in this game. Indiana has 9 plays per drive. Michigan State has 7. Michigan State's only getting 38 yards a drive. Indiana is getting 52. The defense played. They held Michigan State to 17 points until the last drive, and like that's where it's like you just need one last stop. Like you're up 21-17. You need to not let Carr pinball through 12 people and score a touchdown, but they do. And like, that is where it's like, it pops up. So I think that, if the defense had held Michigan State to 17 and Indiana wins this game 21-17, I think we're like, hey man, like that was, they held where they had to. And I think the numbers, you're right, but the numbers would have looked okay. And the defensive numbers actually look okay. The trouble is like when you needed that last stop, it happened. And like, that's where it's like another hole sprung in the boat, and suddenly you're down 24-21. You have a minute left, and now you're scrambling. And it also covers up the fact that, on a positive note, another, pretty good offensive game out of Brendan Sorsby. The receivers are looking good. I mean, guys this is a great way to end the season. This is just like pitch and catch for Sorsby. Like no one's playing defense in any of these games. Sorsby finishes, 19 for 35, not great, but 197 yards, 2 touchdowns. It looks like we have our starter, well named. I'm so excited to see how we mess this up in the offseason and how we do a 12-man quarterback battle to start next year. But Sorsby looks like the guy. And again, your defense gets 2 takeaways. Like everything lined up right. And I focused a lot in those last 40 seconds, but I'll go back and focus on that last defensive drive. It's like that is, I think back to Galen's comments about just like, the boat popping holes, and it feels like, they actually played a pretty good game. You hold a team to 17, that's good, but it's like at the last moment, And this is why like this team is just really hard to trust is in all facets, whether it's the defense or the offense or the coaching or the special teams. When you really need them, I don't think anybody feels like I can trust this team to get it done.
Mm. Yeah, and I will say the rushing defense was really effective. I
Yeah.
mean, they only had 72 yards rushing. Um, it just seemed like whenever they needed a play, they could turn to Caton Hauser to find
Yeah.
either Carr or Foster somewhere in the secondary, you know. But no, I agree. I think yeah, if it was a 17, if it was a 17-point game for Michigan State, I do think we would have walked away thinking that the defense had a pretty productive day. Um, and I just you know, there were just I guess it was just more like there were just some moments, you know,
Yeah.
some moments where you know, it's tied at 14 late in the third quarter. They get the interception from Jamari Sharp and he fumbles it and he
Yep.
turns it back
Yep.
over, you know. Like it's it was just a collection of moments that that kind of led up to it, it just always kind of felt like okay, this game's going to end in some stupid way. You know, like it wasn't going to be as the third quarter was going on, and it seemed like neither team wanted to win this game, and it was tied at 14.
Yep.
It was like, okay, you know, the clock keeps going down, points don't keep going up on the board. Some stupid thing is going to happen because something has to give, and it did. It really did. But I mean, yeah, the defense on that last drive, um, you know, when Malik Carr scored, obviously there was the holding penalty that wasn't called,
Right.
and I think that probably should have been called. But at the end of the day, it's you know, when I'm thinking about penalties, you know, I I am very slow to credit penalties with losses or for losses. I think that there are always things that could have been done beforehand that didn't give the officials that power. And you know, there were three late in the game. That's really tough to overcome. But
Yeah.
you know, that holding penalty on the last drive is probably what people will point to mostly as you know what kept the defense from stopping Michigan State on that drive. But you know, it is what it is, and I yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't have anything else there, Scott.
No, I'm with you. It's it. You know, I don't have the drive chart here. They can't play the drive chart game. It's not up, or I'm not finding the right box score that has it as we're doing this. But I hear you on that. And it's like you have the holding penalty on the Michigan State score. You have the that's cool. Zoom's giving me like a thumbs up bubble because I'm doing a thumbs up to you. You have the holding penalty on the Michigan State score. You have the non-pass interference on the the third down play, and then you have the uncatchable ball penalty that is called. All three of those were very suspect, and it does suck. But I'm also with you when you have a 3-7 team. That it's like you shouldn't be that close. I go back to the idea of I've heard this coach speak many different places, but like just never let the game be so close that you're giving the officials a chance to decide the game. Like get up by in basketball, get up by 10 points. In football, get up by 10 or 12, 14 points, and then it's like the calls suck and that's no fun. But it's like if you would have stopped Carr, just do something along those points. And to your point, the game was 14-14. It felt like for an unbelievably long amount of time. Like put up some points there, get up by 24-14, and then those plays don't hurt you as much. You're not letting the officials decide these games because while it sucks and all of those calls, I think you could have a real argument were not great. I mean, I've been watching IU football for 40 years now. You've been watching for 15, 20 years. We're not at a level where we're going to get the benefit of the doubt in calls. And so you have to assume that you're going to get calls go against you. And that's unfortunately something an Indiana team has to fight and learn to go through.
Yeah, yeah, Scott. And one thing I wanted to make sure to touch on because I saw people talking about this
Yeah.
on Twitter was the Indiana drive that started at the end of the third quarter and ended at the beginning of the fourth quarter. They went 14 plays for 66 yards. It lasted 5.5 minutes, and they got down to the Michigan State 33-yard line. And there were some folks who thought they should have kicked the field goal on fourth and short instead of going for it. In which they went for it. They turned it over on downs. And then what did Michigan State went down and kicked their field goal to go up 17-14.
Right.
So as all this was happening, a lot of folks were saying, "Wow, it would have been really nice to have that field goal." But if you do the math, I mean, we add 17 yards for every field goal, so that'd be a 50-yard field goal from Chris Freeman, which
Yep.
was actually 2 yards longer than the one at the end of the game. I don't think I would have been comfortable putting him in that situation, even though he's hit a 50-yard field goal before. But it kind of goes back to what we were talking about before, where I don't know if they know exactly what the cutoff is for where they want to take a Chris Freeman field goal or not. And I think that there's just been like a bunch of like the foundation of their
Yeah.
place kicking game has been sand the entire year. Like there's nothing solid there. And and it's just like little things like that. It's not like I was talking about before, like fumbling the interception and turning it over. Going forward on that fourth down, when if you had a kicker you could rely on, then you could kick that field goal for 50 yards. 50 yards is still pretty long for a college kicker, but
Yep.
um,
Well, but
and
it goes
they
to
happen
that
to
it
be
goes
late
to that
in the game.
idea of then you should know that like this is again one of the struggles I have with where Indiana football is just like have an identity and feel like you have a plan for the game. And what I mean is like everything you're saying is 100% dead on. If I was the coaching staff and I just go in and be like, all right, hey, unless we're within 25 yards, like we're going for it. Like just that's the call. Like we're just so now hey, offensive coordinator, you can plan on just going for it. So if we're on the 40-yard line and it's 2nd and 5, you got 2 more, you're going to go for it on 4th down. You just know all the time, go for it. But it seems like we get there, and to your point, it's like we're making the decisions in real time. We're trying to figure out. It's like you should just know, like a 50-yard field goal is not going to happen. Know that. So it's like when you're on the 40, you're not kicking a field goal. You're going for it. And it does feel like we're almost handcuffed by like everything has to go through a decision tree. When to your and this is I'm not picking. Allen's made it very clear he's not. He doesn't really get involved in the offensive plays. And we've gone through 5 different offenses. I don't know where it seems like we're always stopping and asking for approval along here. Like whether it was Walt Bell or Rod Carey, like somebody should just be like, hey, you're in charge. And then they should have a plan where they just let everybody know, like, hey, we're going for it. And by the way, I was fine with that 4th down play. And like I said at the end of the game, I'm fine going for it. Like you're playing for the spittoon here. You're not playing for much, but you're playing for something. But just win. Like just go for a win. And I think the aggressiveness would be there, but it's like you're passive, and you can see the entire team and coaching staff thinking, and they're trying to figure out like what's best. It's like once you're there, you're screwed. Like you got to know 8 plays before. And I think that's where I have real frustration, is it just feels like they're trying to figure these out on a case-by-case basis, when in reality, you should just go in and have a game plan. Like, hey, man, we're going to win this game. Like, we're not that we're not going to kick field goals, but unless it's like a 25-yarder, we're just going for it. Like, let's be aggressive. Let's just put them out of their misery. Let's go win a freaking game.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think I have that's kind of what honestly, Scott, that's what I expected. So when
Yeah.
way back before the first week, when they were saying that they didn't really have a starting kicker and that it was going to be distance based, I was like, okay, so they probably put in this idea where I had a hunch it might be Chris Freeman because Nico Radicic is just so young, and and so I was like, okay, well they're probably going to do exactly what you were just saying. Probably going to
Yep.
set up a yard line where if they're behind that yard line, they're not kicking field goals, and it doesn't seem like that's exactly what's happened. And yeah, no, I totally agree. And there, you know, there's a lot of things like that where it just seems like every week there's something new. Like this week, DeQuise Carter had 6 catches. Like where
Yeah.
has that been?
Yep.
And I tweeted it. Like he his competence really showed in this game. Like when he was catching passes, he seemed confident, and like he just it just seemed like he was an experienced receiver who was bringing some uh what's the reliability
Yeah.
to the passing game. And I think, how many targets did he have? He had 7 targets. EJ Williams had 12, and Donovan McCauley had 7. So DeQuise Carter, like, very involved this week in a different way. And I was like, where has that been
Yep.
all year? And I like it just and it just seems like there are things that are constantly changing, but the one thing that won't change is that if they're struggling in the running game, which they didn't today, they were okay in the running game, but they won't go away from it. You
Right.
know, like they still play a bunch of tight ends to help the offensive line run block, which they're not even good at doing, and it keeps other playmakers off of the field. And then when it comes to passing situations, you end up passing to a James Bamba or a Trey Walker, and instead of an Anderson Kobe or a Jalen Lucas, who were Jalen Lucas. I don't did he get any touches today besides the
No, I was
no
going
he
to say
didn't
he became the. We should have a new position, like IU football has taught me about the husky and the bull and all the. I've watched football for years, and it's like all these positions. I didn't know that they existed until we got Tom Allen's defense in here. We should have like the designated. What were they calling him on the broadcast? It was the
like a gadget.
not gadget. It was oh my gosh, I got to cut all this from the podcast. I'm losing my don't turn 40, man. 45 and like I'm
We're
losing.
talking about, and is it an H back?
No, it's not even. It was just a decoy. Sorry, gosh, it was slipped my mind.
Oh, okay.
Like just a decoy. Like we should have
Yeah.
just the official decoy. Like I'm excited next year. I messed my joke up by not knowing a word. Like going into the season, like who's going to be the decoy? Like we have a quarterback battle, we have a decoy battle because like Jalen Lucas was like he's just on decoy he's on decoy now. Like he got no rushing, no receiving. I mean that was 5 weeks ago. It was like how do we get him more involved in the offense? He's not, and it's just it is that cycle. So, Taylor, we'll end with this. We are 3-8 now, going to play Purdue. We're still in trophy mode, baby. Still going for not a spittoon. We're going for a bucket. It's heavier than the spittoon. I like a lot of talk in the broadcast with the weight of the spittoon. That was awesome as well. Where do we go?
Apparently, it's older than the universities themselves.
Yes.
I actually didn't know that.
But it doesn't weigh that much, and you spit into it. Not during COVID. Where does this team go from here? I mean, again, what I will say that I'm pleased by is it doesn't look like the team has given up. Like they're still trying, they're still fighting. So that's
Players are
good.
great, man.
Yeah, it's good.
Mhm.
The decisions are still perplexing, to put it lightly.
Mhm.
I worry about this defense against Purdue. I worry about this team going into West Lafayette and winning. And I do worry at some point about them just kind of running out of gas and being like, all right, what do we have to play for? I know it's the bucket. I know it's Purdue, but you have a lot of transfers in this team and a lot of guys who might just be like, we've pushed about as hard as we can. I'm ready to see the light at the end of the tunnel. But how do you, I mean, real quick, I know you'll do the bite-sized bison. We'll all check it out. But what's your thumbnail thought on where we go from here as it stands right now at 4:43 on a Saturday?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to just get them prepared for one game. It's like one
Yes.
last game. Just go out there. Like, it's this one team. Like, it's just. I think it's a lot easier when it's the last game. There's nothing after it,
Yeah.
and it's like, what are the players willing to give? I think the players are willing to give. What needs to be given. And I think that they kind of proved that today too. I thought there was a lot of good effort out there. But uh, yeah, I mean, I think I don't really know how you overcome such a late season collapse from an entire unit like your secondary. Um, I don't know what has to change there, and it can't be personnel, and
Right.
I don't think that they have the capability of changing their scheme. I think they probably should provide some help to the defensive line and pass rush. The pass rush has been terrible. It wasn't good today either. And honestly, Andre Carter's been a little disappointing in that department. Um, and Linnell Carr is the best pass rusher on this team, and besides the linebackers. And I don't know, man. I think the offense is okay. Like I
Yeah.
think if you do what you've done recently against Purdue, I think you're going to be okay. It's just can the defense help out more? Obviously they stopped the running game for Michigan State, but Purdue's offense is a bit better than Michigan State's, and so
Yeah.
is it to the point where it's going to be like another one of these games where it's just kind of a messy, close game, which is what we're we're used to seeing from a lot of bucket games. But um, yeah, man, I'll have to look deeper into it. But right now, it's just that secondary is just really hurting this team right now.
Yeah,
Yeah, I don't know
and
how
this
you
is a
change
Purdue
that.
team that I don't. I mean, they're having also a very poor season, but it's a team that I cannot. You're not quite sure what you're going to get. I mean, they beat Illinois at the end of September, 44-19, and then they lost four in a row. Of course, they did play Ohio State and they played Michigan, so that's defendable. They also played
Yeah.
Nebraska and Iowa. They played Iowa pretty well, and then they beat Minnesota, and then this week they just turned around and today lost at Northwestern, another team that's having a season. I think this is like the 4-team season from hell battle royale between Indiana, Michigan State, Northwestern, and Purdue. It's like just who's having the worst season, and we're unfortunately in the losers bracket with Purdue. That would be awesome if the Big Ten is just like, you know what, Michigan State's playing Northwestern next week. Like we're just calling it the season from hell bracket. It's like the in-season tournament in the NBA. Like we'll get a new field, we'll have a color thing going on. Like go for it. But we're in the losers bracket of the season from hell, and I don't know what Purdue team's going to show up. Bucket games are always bananas, but normally, you know, in these types of season, Purdue has done better preparing. But who knows? But I'm with you. I'm very nervous because I unfortunately I think the only thing I can depend on is that our secondary is going to be poor. I just don't see that turning around and becoming a strength. And then it goes back to the Galen boat analogy. It's like, all right, can we trust the things? Like it looks like we figured out the passing game, but I don't think you and I would be like, all right, well, I'm comfortable knowing we're going to give Sorsby's going to throw 60% and give us 250 yards and 2 touchdowns and no interceptions. It's like nothing against Sorsby and our receivers. I don't know if I trust that yet, and it's like so I just don't know what we're going to get. But yeah, I mean, it's like you're kind of looking at, you know, this is everyone understands this, but it's like you're kind of playing to tread water. You finished last year 4-8, 2-7 in the Big Ten. You're currently 3-8 and 1-7 in the Big Ten. Like this is not a spot where you want to regress. If nothing else, just to have the right momentum into next year. You know, having at least a bucket win, it's something. It's more than any other game, and you know that's something that even when Wilson was slowly turning things around, it's like, all right, man, well, he's got some bucket wins. Like that was something you could build on. Like that's something that if you're Allen, you need any piece of good news and good momentum going into this offseason. I think Sorsby is one of those things. I think Donovan McCulley, DeQuise Carter, you've seen in the last couple of days, but just to get a bucket win, that would be something you could grasp onto. And I think that's what you're really trying to push and play for.
Yeah, yeah. And a quick note about Purdue's loss today. I forgot about this. Hudson Card didn't play today. And their 2 leading receivers were their running backs. But no, I think yeah, no, I think it's going to be a weird game. I think you need it to gain some goodwill, and I think I made a note of this in a bite-sized bison recently, but it was you know, you want to have some goodwill leaving the season so that you can have at least some momentum as far as like recruiting, because you're
Right.
recruiting a lot of different players, right? You're recruiting not only just high school, but you're also recruiting the transfer portal,
Right.
and you're recruiting your own roster.
Right.
Like you have to, like they said last year, immediately after the last game, they started recruiting Jalen Lucas to keep him here. Well, I think Jalen Lucas might be on the first train out of Bloomington after this year.
Yeah.
Because I wouldn't trust that they would know how to use me if I was Jalen Lucas. But, you know, you like that's a reality. And so if you can if you can show that you're not a black hole for transfers, and it's gonna hurt them to be here, then that's a positive. And I think that this game, is kind of seemingly inconsequential as it is because of the teams playing. Um, I think that's important for Indiana to be able to hold on to that, to have something tangible from the season. Because right now it's you have that Wisconsin win, but I mean everything else is pretty bleak.
Yeah, no, we'll end on there. There's a title for the
Sure.
podcast. Everything's pretty bleak. Check him on Bite Size Bison. Taylor, thank you so much for hopping on with quick reactions. If nothing else, man, IU's interesting. They find different ways to do it every single week. That's for sure. If you're going to be out and about in New York the next couple days, Galen and I will be bouncing around the city. So come find us. We'll be at the home field event. Check us out there. Madison Square Garden. Should be a good weekend. And thank everybody for listening. And for Taylor, this is Scott for Crimson Cast, signing off.